Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, welcome. We are talking about Jean Pain compost heating, and for those of you who don't know who Jean Pain is, we're going to pay some credit to him. And for those of you who don't know or have just learned about compost heating, that is the process of pulling the heat off of a biomiller or a compost process where the heat is created by the natural decomposition of organic material. So Jean Pain was a Swiss-born French inventor, and he produced 100% of his heating needs on his homestead. He is very interesting in my book. I've always thought he was very cool. I remember seeing videos of his little truck driving around with a bubble of methane, and I always wondered what it was, and it was very interesting to me. So I'm sharing all of this with everybody because we've been experimenting with this for quite a few years now, and we've found success with our large compost system. Last winter we had a huge compost pile that heated this greenhouse, and we used the heat from that the entire winter, and we got about 7 to 8 months of heat out of it, and we probably could have got even more if it was better insulated and we didn't have it dry out as much in the summertime. And we dispersed all that broken down material through our whole entire property on all of our perennials, so everything was 100% recycled. We're going to show the system we used. We're going to be adding some systems to the system we used last winter. We found success, and we're just going to add upon that and keep experimenting with things. I apologize if I sound a little funny. I have a sore throat here, so let's try and get into this. So Jean Pain had produced all of the heat and all of the heating needs for his homestead and all of his energy needs. He produced enough methane to run a generator to power everything he needed to run, so he was a pretty self-sufficient guy. He is the one who coined the phrase compost heater, or using compost to obtain the heat, and he basically documented it. So he's the first guy to document all of that and his findings. So he had a free constant hot water supply because he was constantly using all of those mulch and wood chips to heat all of that water up. He would store it in tanks in his home, and he would have access to free hot water for showers and stuff like that. And he produced enough methane to actually be able to cook and heat whatever he needed to. So his aspects of green living was very interesting to me, and we're trying to build upon that. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing to the channel because it's pretty much all we do here on our homestead. So let's get into today's video. Now, the best ideal situation for growing in the winter time and heating with compost would be to put it on a ledge. I had a recent comment that mentioned that Jean Pain built his greenhouse up on a ledge, about a 5-foot, 6-foot ledge, so he could have his compost heap lower and use natural convection, and that is a thermosiphon using natural convection. I had this old piece of poster board here, so thermosiphon using natural convection. I just threw that together. That is not my finest work there, but I just wanted to give an idea through picture what it was. And you're basically just using the natural flow of heat up, and you put your intake tube on the ground, and all of your cold air from the ground would go down. And you can do that with this kind of system. Even though we're not below the grade of our greenhouse, we could still use some type of thermosiphon because we could use the water or the air. Eventually it heats up enough that it starts to transfer. It's just not a whole lot, and that's why we use solar fans, and that's why we use pumps to actually move the water and not have a natural draw. We actually artificially move everything with solar power for free. Substituting in solar power to use fans and pumps and stuff like that is really beneficial because you can control that rate of flow of water or what cubic feet per minute you're pushing. We've been able to achieve a $0 bill for the entire winter. Once we paid for all these systems that we set up, it pays for itself because we do not have any bills in here. We don't have any gas or electricity ran to it. I am going to run electricity out here, but for very minimal uses only, just fans and simple things like that with timers. It's the third winter with this double layer greenhouse, 6 to 8 inch air gap for everybody who's new. This was our winter bunker build, and we put a lot of energy into getting all of this together so we can sit back in the winter time and let all the systems, the autonomous systems, run for us. Now, all of the parts and components that we use are reused and reused over and over and over. We use them in the summer, we use them in the winter. I got new stuff. We're going to talk about the entire system that we're running. I wanted to rework it, but I ended up getting this PEX for $65, a 100-foot roll, and I had purchased this a while ago. So I had this sitting in the garage. I could have bought a 100-foot roll of copper and looped it wider like I'm going to do with this, around our pole. So we had our pole with 100 foot of copper, and I would have spent about 150 bucks. So that's expenditure I didn't want to put into the greenhouse. I would have rather just used this, and I'm going to experiment with this. We're going to set up 2 water systems, one on the pole from last year because I just want to recycle it all the way. That pole is almost composted through, but we're going to use it up, and we're going to run this PEX tubing for water also. So we're going to have 2 interchangeable systems where we can hook up and run water through one and then run water through the other, but not at the same time. So the reason we're in the greenhouse is because it's freaking chilly outside. So we're going to do all of the talking in here, and then I'm going to show everybody all the components, and we'll talk a little bit more outside, but it's darn cold. We're going to talk about how much heat this can actually produce as far as compost heating goes. So active compost produces about 1,660 BTUs per cubic yard per hour of active compost. So that being multiplied by about 4, because there's about 4 cubic yards in a ton of wood chips. So multiplying that by 4 is going to give us about 6,400 or 6,600. So it's actually 6,640 to be exact BTUs per ton per hour. So every ton of wood chips you're composting will produce about 6,600 BTUs per hour as long as it's active. Last year we had about 3 to 4 tons of compost, 14 cubic yards, and we produced about 25,000 BTUs per hour off of our compost pile last winter. Now this year I have a pile that is about 8 to 9, maybe 10 tons. So we have a ton of wood chips out there. We have 2 full loads or maybe 3 loads, I'm not sure. The guy said I needed more. I could call him up and we could get more wood chips, but I think we should be good with what he got. We have at least double the wood chips we had last year, so this is going to be interesting trying to wire this all together and insulate it and stuff. So it might just be so massive it doesn't need insulation because it'll insulate itself. So relating 8 to 9 eyeballed tons of compost or wood chips as compost, we can get between 53 and 56,000 BTUs just as an estimate off of that per hour. So 55,000 BTUs per hour estimated is a darn good number. I wanted to be at about 50,000. To heat 1 pound of air, or about 13.3 cubic yards of air equaling 1 pound, it takes about 0.24 BTU to raise it 1 degree. Now the same of water, 1 pound of water, it takes 1 whole BTU to raise it 1 degree. So it is exponentially more energy put into raising the temperature of water. So I'm going to experiment with 2 water systems, but the air system really was nice, and we're going to direct this air into our tunnels like we did last winter, and we're going to put the heat right where it needs to be. Now to roughly find the BTUs that it requires to heat a room, a well-insulated room. Now this is not a well-insulated room, but it is insulated, and it's kind of insulated well. So we have 2 layers and we're doing pretty good in here. So I'm going to consider it a well-insulated room for the aspect of this video. So the formula is you just take the square footage, which is 520 square feet times 20, and that equals about 10,500 or so BTUs that it requires per hour to keep this at room temperature, which is about 65, between 60 and 70. So that is a lot of BTUs cranking per hour just to keep the heat at one certain temperature, and that's without losing all the heat to the outside, or based on the temperature outside we could be losing a lot more. But that was just to give an idea of how much it takes to heat an area of space. Waited here, get my camera situated. So we've got all our pumps. I got a new little experimental fan. I'm going to run AC/DC, so I'll be able to hook this up on solar power without an inverter. Lots of pumps, lots and lots of pumps, just experimenting. Lots of water pumps, very simple to use. We've got all the solar power, solar systems, solar system down here running solar fans. We've got solar fans blowing through the bricks, running our geothermal, and same thing with our fan here, which is disconnected. All of this is getting cleaned up, and we got to run our PEX tubing underneath there, and we haven't cleaned out the insulation from last winter. This is our little transfer case right here. So this is where all of the heat transferred through, and we need it insulated. So our little transfer area was for our air and for our water. You can see our copper tubes we had insulated. And we had this board over here. You see this board in the background somewhere by our solar panels. We had that pressed up right here to keep the compost from falling against our greenhouse. And I really didn't like how in the ground this was, so I'm going to rework this and definitely have a good wrap of pipe insulation, because the ground is where you're going to lose a ton of your heat, and we lost a lot of heat on our copper and our heat coming in because we had it in contact with the ground. So it took me a little bit of experimenting and a lot of work to get all of this figured out, but this is what we're going to be doing. And this PEX tubing, I'll move the camera here, you can see our little pole there. So this pole was last winter experiment, and it is kind of rotten. I can't believe it's actually still standing. It's probably just the copper holding it up, but we've cleared this whole basin out so we can wrap all of our wire. We've got all of our wire fencing that we use to hold the compost in at the base, so we can get a good 4 to 5 foot buildup on the outside, so we don't have anything falling out, and the wire holds it in pretty good. And we're able to get good insulation from that also, because we can put our leaf bags and stuff on that, and then that thing really cooks through and through. So really the only piece of this that I haven't covered was using a timer. You'll really want to use some type of timer so you can really mediate those flows and mediate all the heat coming in, and really store it at nighttime, or build it up before nighttime and store all that heat. So as you can see way back there, we're going to be doing a ton of work this weekend. I got my buddy with the tractor. He's going to be bringing it over here. I really wanted to talk about what I'm doing with 2 water systems and how I'm going to loop that, because I didn't want to spend the money on copper, and I wanted to try and see what kind of heat we can draw and transfer through PEX as opposed to our copper. Our copper definitely cooled off in the middle of winter and in the middle of the pile. So it stayed about 75 to 80 degrees all winter long, guaranteed. It was active, but it did cool off because that core was the first spot to cook, and it really cooked this log and stuff. So we are going to get our rings put together. We're going to put our ring around and give our perimeter and stuff, and then we'll be setting all of this up. Head back on in the warm greenhouse here. It's getting dark on me. This time change is killing me. Let's take a little tour of the greenhouse here. So everything is looking really good that we've planted. Our pond is deeper than it looks. I mean, it's a good couple feet down now. Looking at 2.5 feet, 3 feet deep. Just give some perspective. That's going to go a lot longer and possibly deeper and wider for catfish. Lots and lots of growth. This bed was sacrificed for that potato bed. Lots of kale and random seeds coming up in here too. I don't know if the potatoes are even gonna sprout on me. So I've pretty much made it back to the other side of the greenhouse. Everything is looking darn good in here. These potatoes are totally cool in this bed. I love this little raised bed here. I'm gonna do a lot more experimenting with potatoes next winter, next fall. So we're always learning stuff, and we're always trying to share everything. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching this. Thanks to all the subscribers and everybody for commenting, questioning. And if you got any questions on anything going on today, I've got a lot of work to do, and then we're going to have a long update video when we build this pile, get it active, and get it running.